Shalom and welcome. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and this is yet another edition of TV7 Editor's Note. And joining me this time here in Jerusalem, all the way from Spain, is my dear friend and mentor. So many things, Dr. Rafael Bardají, CEO of Worldwide Strategy. It's a pleasure, as always.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Indeed. And as we always do here in Editor's Note, we'll start with prayer, and then we'll dive into a very interesting scope of various topics, and I encourage you to join us and also to remain tuned in, as this might provide a lot of enlightenment, I would emphasize. Thank you, Lord, for today, Father. Thank you for the blessing and privilege of being able to be here together with dear Rafael. Father, I pray that you'll bless this program, bless the viewers that are watching us right now, also with the understanding and knowledge that may be guided by you in order to bless each and every one of them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Rafael, we obviously have been missing you from TV7 Europa stands for a couple of months now. You've been quite active back in Spain, and with quite the impressive successes. How about you tell us a little bit of background and what's it all about?
Yes, well, in a nutshell, we had been living under a very radical social communist government in the last 4 years. We had recently, a couple of weeks ago, local and regional elections where this government suffered a big defeat. I mean, there was a big rejection of the policies carried out by this social communist government. And because of that, the president decided to call for early elections in a month's time. So we have been busy in putting, the narrative and the marketing and the strategies to convince the people to vote against the social communist policies. We obtained a big result in the regional and local elections, and we are now doing our best for defeating the government in the general election, despite all the tricks that they are playing, dirty tricks, like selecting a day where almost 20 million Spaniards will be on holidays. But anyway, that's political life.
But it's political life that has also dire consequences, not only for Spain, but also for other countries.
Yep.
A government that has been rubbing shoulders with Venezuela, with Iran for that matter.
I think the Spanish government has been the worst you can imagine in a developed country for many years, forever. I think linked to all the wrong people. Nonetheless, Europe is changing. I think we had the election in Sweden, we had the election in Finland, we had the election in Italy. Now we have the chance to replace the social communist government with a conservative right center, supported by my party, the conservative right-wing party, Vox. And I think that it's creating a new momentum in Europe, where the politically correctness, the wokeism, the social democrats going to the left or to radical left has the days numbered, at least. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, I think, for the first time in many years. And that will have also repercussion in the way the European Union is conducting their business, which is going to really the extremes and craziness. So I'm optimistic for the first time that yes, there's a constellation of parties that are emerging and are progressing in the path to power.
Which is a consequence, as you say, of the European institution in Brussels and Strasbourg, for that matter, as well. We saw that also, of course, in the regional elections in the Netherlands, where the Boeren party also won quite decisively in most districts. So it's quite apparent that people are not happy with the diktats of the institution in Brussels.
Well, I think generally people has a good common sense, and I think the institution that should be representing us has lost all the common sense you can imagine. They are taking measures that nobody voted for. They're trying to be the nanny super state, telling us what to drink, what to eat, where to move, where to go, what kind of cars should we use. And I think it's too much. People are realizing that nobody entitled them to change socially so much, and that you have to push the brake, somehow. And I think this is a good lesson. The problem is that those institutions are accelerating their movement because they know that they may be reduced and limited in time if the new governments arrive in Europe.
And they're also backing certain contenders. If we take Poland, for example, which is due to have its own elections, Donald Tusk was appointed as a commissioner in the European Commission at the expense of the one that the Polish government wanted. Of course, he is Merkel's man, so he got that opportunity. But then now he's running in Poland, and the people in Poland, it's down the middle, it seems. The polarization in Europe is also growing.
The European Union has become a revolving door for politicians who lose their election in their countries, are preserving this ecosystem of radicalism, political correctness, and then when they decided, they send them back to fight against the institutional governments, which is not for what the European Union was created, I thought originally. I think there have been many quantic jumps that we didn't realize on time, But now I think people is fed up, really, I say enough. I mean, you cannot impose us to eat worms while they are celebrating with beef in Brussels, and or moving from diesels to electric cars that nobody can afford, or not talking about the reality of the batteries, which are much more contaminating than the diesel or gasoline engines, or closing down farms because they think there are too many farmers in the world, and I think that they have lost control of the reality, and that's something people is now really suffering and thinking that this is enough.
And it seems that it's not only happening, obviously, in Europe. It's also happening in the United States, which, of course, the 2024 elections are going to be a big deal, not only for the U.S., but all over the world.
Yep.
And also here in Israel. There is an ongoing polarization on both sides, which seems that efforts to somehow mitigate the capacity of small radical groups is proving to be a challenge.
Yeah, but I think they have a point in the narrative that they won, the progressives are saying we are the true democratic people, the real tolerant people, but in fact they are the more dictatorial and the more intolerant people ever. But they flip the narrative. If you are fighting the wokeism, you're a fascist. Which is the opposite.
If you're debating it,
it's the opposite.
A matter of debate. I obviously studied television and everything that has to do with it in order to create what we created here. And it was always about debating different opinions and giving room for other opinions and allowing you to challenge that.
Correct.
And by doing so, you could indicate your validity, your position's validity, which ultimately is today rejected. It's nullified.
In part because the left, which is behind all this politically correct and wokeism mentalities, has always understood politics as warfare. It's the opposite of Clausewitz. And because of that, you have to demonize your opponent. You have to win everything, and destroy completely the will of your opponents. And there is no room for understanding or room for consensus, because consensus for them is the way they had all the power. So that mentality has to be challenged and has to be changed profoundly. And I think only the conservative and the center moderate right can do it.
Let me challenge, though, one point. Let's say Vox takes the lead in the election alongside the major conservative party, and together you form a coalition. What can you do when your constitution grants Brussels all the power?
Well, that's true, but I think you can negotiate somehow some of the policies. I mean, still, there is a devolution process, and it can be done, but you have to be firm, you have to be constant, and you have to negotiate from strength. And strength means political will. That's the issue. The problem here is not negotiating with Brussels, is that the conservative parties, the popular parties in Europe, are prisoner of the pro-European narrative of the past. They have not been updated the information from Europe, no, and so it's going to be different. Only what we can call the alternative right is promoting an alternative vision for the European Union. No? For the time being, unfortunately, the alt-right in Europe is relatively small, no? With the exception of course, a few countries like Finland or Italy or Sweden. No? Let's see.
Well, another angle that I think that is also important to highlight is the fact that there is a difference of understanding in the Baltic states and the West European states. The one seeks more reform, the other seeks evolution, so to speak.
Well, I think if you have experienced communism in your own blood and flesh for many years under the power of the Soviet Union, you have a total different culture, experience, and vision for the future. And I think the great divide in Europe now, again, is from the Central East Europe and the Western all Europe because of the historical experience. And that can be seen particularly how they perceived Russian policies and invasion of Ukraine compared to other countries, France or Spain or Portugal. But the key question is understanding that they had been prisoners of communism for many years, and that's something which is very good. We have a buffer zone against this progressive policy because they know what it is and they know the ruin they bring morally and economically and socially to their countries.
Let's take another angle of this issue, and that is illegal immigration. The West has been contending with, if I look at the Netherlands, about 50,000, 55,000 a year. It means that within 20 years, even less now, the Netherlands is going to be predominantly Muslim, not Dutch origin. It's also becoming more and more apparent. I hear from certain, intelligence officials and ambassadors that certain ambassadors who are appointed from different foreign ministries in Europe who come from origin, either from Turkey or elsewhere, they start collaborating with the ambassadors of Turkey to align their own agendas. And then it seems like they're not really representing their home countries in the West. So it seems like this is slowly taking its toll on Western countries, also on the diplomatic front. What can be done in such a situation when even taking the European Union here in context, we have ongoing investigations, arrests near weekly of different politicians for corruption scandals having to do with the Qatari corruption, having to do with Moroccan corruption, with Turkish corruption, that have invested billions in shaping Europe into receiving their Muslim migrants.
Yeah. Well, I think operationally speaking, preventing illegal immigration is easy. It's easy because we know the routes that are used, we know the infrastructure they're using, we know the human traffickers that are involved, and I think we should attack the human trafficker as we did with the pirates in the Indian Ocean. Sincerely, I think we can destroy the infrastructure, and without infrastructure, there is no way they can come, or it will be much more limited, okay? Secondly, I think it's a problem of culture and strategic vision. For the left, illegal immigration and Muslim immigration into Europe is another tool to fight capitalism and to fight the liberal society. But there are some parts of the conservative and the right that understand that having illegal immigration is good for the businessman because they can pay lesser salaries. And they only judge immigration in economic terms, not in the social damage they produce, no? And that has to be changed. In Spain, we spent around probably 9 billion a year in illegal immigration, social benefits, no? Which is more than the defense spending. And that's ridiculous. They never contributed to anything to the welfare state, and they are taking all the benefits away from the Spanish people. And that's something that had to be changed radically.
And ironically, those same people will end up, or the progressive left is going to be the first victims of those coming in, which is, by the way, the same in the United States. You see groves of people, groves of illegal immigration entering the country. Nevertheless, those people entering the country, for the most part, particularly Mexicans, they're conservative in nature and will end up one
Yeah.
day, if they turn out to be Americans, vote for the Republicans rather than the Democrats. So how is that in the calculus as well?
Well, that's changing in America. No? In the past, Hispanic immigration has been with the Democrats, shifting nowadays. But in the past, they were more linked and related to the Democratic Party, and they thought that making it easier for them to vote will favor them. In Europe, it's slightly different because yes, the Hispanic immigration, particularly to Spain, is conservative, religious-oriented, family-oriented, but the Muslim is not. No? And even given the fact that the Muslim is against all what the progressive understand as a normal life, and you see the amount of violence against gay people in the streets by Muslim in Europe, for them is a price to pay if they inject this Trojan horse into European societies. No? So it's how to ride the tiger of contradictions. But for them, it's a secret weapon, no? And that's something that has to be stopped.
Interesting. Well, of course, there's the Australian model of how to deal with immigration, which is very successful, at least from what I hear. But also here in Israel, it's been quite successful. After roughly 100,000 illegal immigrants walked into Israel from various African countries, they ended up putting that security barrier, which is very efficient. It seems to have blocked all entry.
At the same time, we need to reform the legal immigration processes, because if legal immigration is almost impossible to accomplish, you get illegal immigration.
Right.
So we need to make clear that immigration sometimes is needed, but it's the right immigration you need. No? You have to pinpoint what kind of profile you're looking for and make the mechanism open to them. No?
Absolutely. Well, let's move to another topic, because I think it's a very important topic, which you are very knowledgeable about and obviously have quite the understanding of this issue. The Islamic Republic of Iran is on the verge of breakout to having enough feasible material for several nuclear weapons. It seems that the Americans are on the verge of having a sort of an arrangement with the Ayatollah regime, despite all the different discrepancies that occur. It seems like the policy of containment of this Biden administration continues unhindered, and they seek to basically brush it under the rug until the next administration has to deal with it. What are we going to ultimately have to deal with?
Unfortunately, ultimately, you have to deal with a nuclear Iran. The issue is now what is going to happen from here to the elections in the United States. No? The Iranian has a window of opportunity to force the current American administration to unfreeze billions they have abroad for a promise of not deploying nuclear weapons, no? Not stopping the nuclear program, but not weaponized somehow what they have. No? I think the American administration is ready to sign such a kind of agreement and pass the problem to future generations. I understand that Americans feel secure. They have a nuclear arsenal. They are in the distance, and they can, promise no regime change in exchange for money and not killing Americans in Iraq or somewhere else. That's fine for them. No? Containment has worked with the Soviet Union, with China, with North
Apparently
Korea.
not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing is on the nuclear level. On the non-nuclear level, the conventional level, the exchanges can go on forever. And that's a problem for the region, no? For Israel, the Saudis, and others, because, okay, you close the door of any nuclear exchange, but you are giving them an umbrella and a security guarantee, that they can do under the nuclear threshold whatever they want, and they are not going to be attacked. No? That will embolden them through proxies, through terrorist actions. So in any case, we are going to see a much more emboldened Iran in the next coming months than in the past, unless we take another path, which is increase sanctions and make them feel the heat for not behaving as they agreed in the past nuclear agreement, no? Which was a bad one. But anyway, they had gone well beyond all the limits set by the JCPOA. You know?
Well, the Central Command, the Americans here in the region, agree with you because apparently they are deploying additional forces in Al-Hasaka and other areas in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere, which indicates that they are preparing for an emboldened Iran and potentially trying to deter Iran from continuing its unabashed attacks against U.S. forces and U.S. coalition forces in the region.
I mean, if I were in Tehran, seated, I will look an American, which is decaying. The president is too old. I don't know who is going to be the next president. But even if the worst case, Trump wins again the elections, he will be focusing on how to reach an agreement with Russia on Ukraine before focusing on Iran. So you have time, you have room for maneuvering, and you can do whatever you want from here to then. So yes, it's a matter of combining the military capability of your enemies with the political will. And it's a multiplication, it's not an addition. So political will 0, capability 100 equals 0. No? So that's what the Iranians may think. No? But if they do an stupidity, they will provoke a reaction. So they have to be also careful. No?
And the Iranians know that if they do provoke a reaction, it will cost them their regime. When you're looking at the region, would a nuclear-armed Iran, or it's already a threshold state, but let's say that an Iran that has the capacity to potentially claim to have a certain arsenal of sorts, will it provoke Turkey, for example, Saudi Arabia, other countries in the region to also turn nuclear?
Well, historically, you have extended deterrence by America to European countries. But even so, the French and the British developed nuclear weapons. So I assume that the same dynamics will happen in the region. The traditional adversaries of Iran will say, we want not only the weapon because we need to be in the same path or level of nuclear deterrence with Iran, but also because it's a pride, national pride, to be in the equal footing. So Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Algeria.
Israel, potentially?
Israel should, I think, may be reconsidering the nuclear ambiguity policy. Yes, why not?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have roughly 5 minutes left, and I do want to highlight one more topic, and that is the fact that, the war in Ukraine is continuing. It has rattled the European NATO composition, as you mentioned yesterday, in the very intriguing episode of Watchmen Talk, which I very much appreciate. Do you see the division between France on the one hand, which seeks to have a certain coalition of European states joined together in building a certain defense for a long-term strategy, as opposed to the Germans, who are all about, we currently need to deal with a threat, let's just deal with it, acquisitions from Israel, the Arrow 3, and other countries, and then be ready and look how to proceed from there?
Well, I think the division, the political vision, divisions in Europe still are there, but it will be much more dependent on what happened on the ground. We had been waiting for this famous spring offensive, which never happened. Now it seems to be developing a little bit. But if the Ukrainians are not able to present a victory vision that they are reconquering the ground, and they are doing that in a Jurassic speed, it's inch by inch over the weeks, I think people will start asking whether there's a military solution to this conflict, I'm afraid. No?
Well, it took 30 years of war to ultimately reach the Westphalia treaties of 1648. So maybe, that brought about the independence of the Netherlands and Germany and other countries. Maybe.
Yeah, could be, but I don't think we or Russia, the Ukrainians, have the time for a 30 years long war. No? I think we may be seeing some kind of negotiation at the end of the year, because even if we want to provide more ammunition, more weapons, more systems, we are depleting ourselves. And at some point, we need to keep the forces we have in order to repel potential attacks on us. No? And Ukraine has no money, and the Russians can keep the economy for 2 years. No? After that, they will start suffering. But for the time being, the only winner here is China, no? Unfortunately. But also a new American presidency may change their vision about Ukraine. The Republican Party is not as eager as keeping the help, financial and military, as the Democratic Party or the current administration. The progressive side of the Democratic Party is also not very engaged with the issue as well.
But there is bipartisan support, it seems.
Yeah, up to now, but there is also, in the Republican Party is also the traditional burden sharing, no? They are paying 50 billion while Europe is 8 billion, no? So at some point, they have to balance that, no? And so I can't see a war going on forever. No? I think we are much weaker in the Western camp for helping Ukraine over years. So I think the Ukrainians understand that, and they are now trying to get a quicker solution. No? They are focusing on Crimea as the best strategy to bring down the Russian forces in Ukraine. I don't know if they will succeed or not. No? It has to be seen.
Is peace viable? We have several seconds left.
Not now. Nobody wants to compromise.
An armistice, maybe?
But it depends. The casualties are mounting very rapidly, so the fatigue will come, and I think they will be forced to make an understanding sooner than later.
Well, Dr. Rafael Bardají, it's always a pleasure having you here in Jerusalem and Helsinki and elsewhere as well. I really appreciate you taking out of your busy schedule to come here to the studio.
Thank you. My pleasure, as always.
And I'd like to thank all of you also at home. And until next time, from us here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
As the world is being shaken, what is to become of Europe? TV7 Europa Stands brings European policy experts and influencers to share their up-to-date and informed picture of the situation. Join us for TV7 Europa Stands to better understand the events that are shaping today's world.
I have set watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem, said the prophet Isaiah long ago. In our time, these watchmen have been Israel's creative and dedicated military and security experts in and out of uniform who have joined us on TV7 israelnews.com to share their stories and lessons. I am Amir Oren, the host of this special series. Please join us for this unique opportunity to get acquainted with the people who have been standing watch on Israel's walls.